Hi guys, and thanks for tuning in to today's Change Talks, interviews that spread ideas. Now today is special because I am interviewing a legend in the coaching industry. Sir John Whitmore was a pinnacle figure in bringing coaching to the UK. He is the author of the massively popular book Coaching for Performance that is used by budding and experienced coaches alike. He is also a preeminent thinker in leadership and organisational change, and works globally to establish leadership programs within the workplace. This is a really good interview that goes into Sir Whitmore's philosophies around coaching and what coaches need to do to stand out and flourish in today's market. I certainly enjoyed this interview, and I hope that you do too.
You're a prominent figure in bringing coaching into the forefront of people's minds a few decades ago. And I was just wondering if we can start by talking about what differences, whether a good thing or a bad thing, have you noticed in coaching from the time that you started to the present day?
At the beginning, of course, there was very few people doing it, and those that were doing it were very dedicated. So they were very interested in looking quite deeply in how to do this sort of thing and what worked and what didn't work. And I think a lot of people at the start had their basis in the new humanistic psychologies. So I think most of us at that time were quite involved in the new psychology. And therefore, we were applying that sort of thing to coaching. How does that work in coaching? Also, in several of our cases, myself and Jim Galway and people like that, we were involved with sport also. We were looking at applying the new coaching methodology in sport. And so there was a continuity in the name, at least then, although the process was very different. Because we were asking questions, and in the old days, sports coaching was very much about telling. So we were very keen at the start, and then I think as time went on, of course, a number of people sort of tried to, jump on the bandwagon of coaching. And unfortunately on the internet, there was some sort of cheap and cheerful coach training, come on here a couple of times a week and you'll be a coach, And so I think there was some decline as more people came into coaching. There was some decline in the standard on average. But I think that the profession actually took care of that, in a sense, started to correct that itself. And I think things like the ICF and the EMCC and that sort of thing that had qualification demands, I think that helped also, and forced people to, if they were going to be professional, they needed to get some qualifications and so on. So I think that that was a compensation which dealt with some of these cheap and cheerful entries. Although I have to say, I'm sure there are plenty of people today who are setting themselves up as coaches who are not properly trained at all. So I think we have to be aware of that, and I think that all coaches and professionals should be very careful about that.
Do you think the public are more aware of whether to ask about someone's qualifications, or do you think that still there's still a sense that a coach would come in and not necessarily be qualified, and the person that's actually receiving the coaching doesn't actually necessarily know the questions to ask to see whether they are qualified?
Well, I think if we're talking about corporate coaching and business coaching, I think most of the people who would bring in business coaches would expect the coach to have some qualifications and would ask them whether they were appropriately qualified. I think if there was independent sort of life coaching type of thing, they might not ask those questions. And I think that people certainly should ask those questions to begin with. But, I have to say about qualification, I think there are people who are very well qualified because they're good at doing exams, shall we say, and yet they lack some of the people skills. And I think that people skills are crucially important with coaching, and I think you can get qualifications without being good at people. So I don't think there's an absolute answer to this. I think it's very important that people who receive and seek coaching are pretty careful about what they go for, and that they are willing to say this is not working and stop doing it if it's not working right.
Okay, so if we were to move on to the next question, look at the actual role of a coach. What would you say is the actual role of the coach? Would you say it involves multiple roles, or is there one defining role that kind of engulfs it all?
Well, I don't see one defining goal as such, because I think there are many different aspects of coaching. You're trying to achieve different things for different people at different times. But I do think there's one thing that's absolutely consistent throughout coaching, and that is that the two things that a coach is trying to do with the coachee is to have the coachee become more aware of circumstances, so aware of the external circumstances, and also, very importantly, self-aware of what's going on with themselves. And I think the self-awareness is absolutely crucial for people skills and for coaching skills. So that's the starting point. Now, once you've got the awareness correct, the next thing that coaches are going for, obviously, is to get the coachee to take responsibility and not tell them what to do, because if somebody tells somebody else what to do, the teller is the one who's taking responsibility. And, of course, what we want is the coachee to take responsibility. So I always say that what coaching is about is building high awareness and building high responsibility in the coachee.
Okay.
And I think that's the crucial elements.
So the two main points are self-awareness for the coachee, and also for them over the course of the coaching interaction to show signs that they're taking responsibility for their outcome.
Yes, absolutely. And the self-awareness is absolutely crucial, because without self-awareness you misjudge other people, because we project our own psychology onto other people sometimes. And so if there's a disagreement between two people, I think both people will blame the other one for it. And that's a lack of self-awareness. So that's very, very important that we have the self-awareness so that we can build proper relationships. It's extremely important that coaching starts with good relationships.
Okay. So I was reading some of the articles that are on your website, and you say in one of the articles, coaching is a way of seeing people. Don't try and use it as just a tool. And I was wondering whether you could elaborate on that.
Well, I think there is an unfortunate thing that some people think that in order to be a successful business person or leader or manager or something, that they have to have a collection of little tricks they use at certain circumstances for certain situations. And I'm very sort of completely disagree with that in terms of coaching, because coaching really is a way of seeing people. It's the way you look at people. What we do with coaching is look at people as having a lot more potential than they express. So what we are trying to do is to help them to bring out of themselves that which is already inside them, and we're bringing that out. And that does require more skill than just a little trick sort of thing. I mean, obviously, coaches develop little sort of trick questions and things like that I find are very useful. But it's much more profound than that. And I think people who go into it thinking that coaching is just asking a few questions at the right time, I don't think they're successful at all.
Right.
It's a much broader sort of way of looking at people than that.
So it's kind of like seeing behind all the stuff that they've built up that's prevented them from believing in themselves and believing the actual potential that they can go towards.
Well, that's absolutely true in the sense that, and Tim Galway expresses this very strongly with the inner game, because he says the inner game is about eliminating the internal obstacles to performance, learning, and enjoyment. And the internal obstacles are one's mental obstacles, one's anxieties and fears and all those things that cause an emotional response to circumstances which then stand in the way of clear, clean performance.
Okay. Now, in your book, Coaching for Performance, you championed the GROW model, and now that model is being used by coaches throughout the world. What do you think it is about that model that's stood the test of time and is still getting used today by a lot of coaches around the world?
Well, it's a very good question, that, and it's a very interesting question, because first of all, I want to say that I did not actually invent the GROW model on myself. No. we at that time were using those 4 stages in coaching anyway, and we were just looking around for a word that would summarize them. And at the time, I think there was somebody, I think Graham Alexander or somebody with him were talking to McKinsey's. And it was actually the McKinsey person who said, well, what about grow, and goal and so on. And that's where it came from. And we didn't think it was important at all at the time. We just sort of said, well, okay, that's a way of just having that 4-stage sequence.
Okay.
And then over time it got attributed, and I put it in my book, which became a very popular book at the early days, and so people attributed it to me and said it was very important. But I really want to say something that a lot of people don't understand, because some people say, oh yes, I'm a coach, I use the GROW model. But GROW is simply a chronological sequence of 4 processes. And it's only chronological. That is all it means. It doesn't tell you anything about coaching at all, because you can use that chronological order in an order of giving commands, can't you? So it could be completely non-coaching and still use the GROW sequence. So I think far too many people have put much too much importance on GROW, because they think it is coaching rather than it's simply a sequence that a good coach will probably use quite a lot of the time anyway.
So it's part of coaching. It's not the coach, and it's not the thing that you need for coaching. There's a whole host of other things that are in there as well.
And a lot of times you won't use that full sequence. In fact, some of the most effective coaches, and I've certainly had this experience many times in the early days, when you start coaching somebody on the G, I mean, it's a good place to start, is what does somebody want to achieve? And you really explore what they want to achieve, and they find out quite early that what they thought they were wanting to achieve was not what it was. And then they suddenly get a wake-up call, and it says, oh my God, I see I'm on the wrong goal. And then they say, oh, now I know the right goal. Now I can go for that. I understand that. So they stop in the G stage.
Yes.
Because they've already recognized the flaw was in their failure to identify the correct goal. So then you don't have to necessarily go through all the other stages, So I think people get too attached to those sort of models. I mean, a model is only a model after all,
Yeah. And what you were saying just then shows the value in coaching. That if someone thinks they have one goal, and when they go through the coaching process, they realize it's not actually what they want at all. That just shows that the actual massive value that coaching can give a person.
Well, that's true. And just to add to that, I mean, very often people look at their goals quite superficially to begin with, or not. I mean, I don't think they're looking at it superficially, but they are looking at it the way we do in our normal life. When you ask them a few questions, it forces them to look a bit deeper. And as they look deeper, they get clearer. That's why I think it's very effective.